In today's show, Jalen Brunson is about to get paid. What does that mean for Anfernee Simons and the Trailblazers? Well, Locked On Blazers, let's get into it.
You are Locked On Trailblazers, your daily Portland Trailblazers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What up, world? It's your past first point guard and Trailblazers reporter, Mike Richmond. You are listening to another episode of Locked On Blazers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, available wherever you get podcasts and also on YouTube. Thanks for making this show your first listen every single day. It's coming at you 5 days a week, every single weekday, so make it a part of your daily routine and make it your first listen every single day. We got a fun show for you today. Free agency hasn't started, but it's already started. That's the beauty of the NBA, is that they have a built-in tampering period, and yet teams still agree to contracts way before it even starts because the rules are for chumps. They're for chumps, I tell you. So a couple contracts that I think that were agreed to today. One signed because legally it can be signed. The other one that's coming in the opening minutes of the moratorium. We already know about it. 48 hours before it starts, 48 hours before you can start negotiating, we already know something that's going to be agreed to. It's quite a world here in the National Basketball Association. I don't know exactly how I feel about it, but a couple deals, and I want to talk about what they mean, the implications that these deals that we know that are signed, what they might mean for the Trailblazers. And let's start with a big one, and I mean big, really just a great deal of money, a ninth digit, $110 million. Jalen Brunson, reportedly, I believe this news first broken by Chris Haynes of Yahoo Sports, although Mark Stein on his newsletter on Substack first reported that Brunson to the Knicks was pretty much a done deal, but the finances first reported by Chris Haynes. And then it was made even more official today when the New York Knicks traded Alec Burks and Nerlens Noel to the Detroit Pistons to clear even more cap space. And so what are the Knicks going to do in the opening minutes of free agency? They're going to back up that Brinks truck and they're going to give Jalen Brunson 4 years, $110 million. Good for Jalen Brunson. Good for you, dog, to make $27 million a year in this league. Tight. A second round pick in 2018, about to sign his enter free agency for the first time and sign a $110 million contract. Props to you, my boy. First of all, it's like we're going to talk about contracts a bunch over the next week on this podcast, and I'm going to refrain from using the word worth. Worth doesn't mean anything to me. What's Jalen Brunson worth? Well, the Knicks cleared all this cap space and gave him $110 million. That's what he's worth. But it's more like, does Jalen Brunson have value at $27 million? Probably not. He probably can't perform up to that contract, but he's good, and he was really good in the playoffs. In fact, this season, he averaged 16.3 points, 3.9 rebounds, and 4.8 assists, and he slashed 50, 37, 84. Slash would be your field goal percentage, shot 50% from the floor, 37% from three, and 84% from the free throw line. And then he went nuts in the offs. He got to the playoffs, and your boy went bonkers. Averaged 21.6 points, 4.6 boards, and 3.7 assists, 46, 35, 80 on your slash line there, and he had just some monster games. Down 1-0 with Luka Doncic injured at home, the chance to survive, lays it on the Jazz. 41, 8-5. As the guy on a playoff team in a game you just basically got to win. He went ahead and did it, 41-8-5, a monster night. He had 24 in Game 7 when they closed out the Suns in that absolute beatdown. He had 31 in Game 2 in the Western Conference Finals in Game 2 against the Warriors, when that was as close as really Dallas got to winning one in San Francisco. It seems like that was it. It seemed like they had a chance there, and Jalen Brunson was really good in that game. And he gets 4 for 110, a guy who averaged 16, 4, and 5. And you might be asking yourself, didn't Anfernee Simons have better stats than that? Yeah, dog. He did. Ant last year, 17.3 points, 2.6 boards, 3.9 assists. Way fewer rebounds and fewer assists. 44% from the floor, 40.5, 41% from three, and 89% from the free throw line. Ant's not as good at getting to the rim or getting inside, driving. Like Jalen's a better driver, pull up artist. Ant's a better shooter. Brunson is a better defensive player. They're pretty comparable just in counting stats alone. The argument you're really making here is that Jalen Brunson has just been a lot more productive than Anfernee Simons. Anfernee Simons isn't going to make no 4 for 110 in the open market. In fact, we've been saying here on this podcast, and I don't even want to claim this as like, I knew it or whatever, because all of you have been saying this. The guess for Anfernee Simons has been 4 for 80 because that's $20 million a year. And we think like Anfernee Simons looks like a dude who's about to make $20 million. Michael Scotto of Hoops Hype reported earlier this week that that's the guess. That is the assumption, according to league sources, that the Blazers are going to agree to a contract with Anfernee Simons somewhere in the range of 4 for 80 million. Duh. Every fan with a Twitter account has known that that's like roughly the Anfernee Simons range. His max is up there in that 115 range. He's not going to get that. He's not going to make as much money as Brunson just because the lack of productivity. I think in some ways Jalen Brunson is going to set the high water mark for a guard who changes teams this summer. James Harden is going to sign a contract extension with the Sixers. It's going to be very, very big. Zach LaVine's probably going to re-sign with the Chicago Bulls for a whole bunch of money. I think Bradley Beal is about to cash the hell in Washington and make a whole bunch of money signing with the Wizards. So I don't mean to say that this is the high watermark for contracts, but the high watermark for a guard changing teams in a free agent class is not particularly good, and Brunson was at the top of that class, 4 for 110. So I think it sets kind of that. It sets the expectation that Anfernee Simons is not going to make more money than that. Could Anfernee Simons use this leverage to say, well, you were going to, 4 for 80 is what we talked about, but like, look at my dude over in Madison Square Garden. Do you think that, I haven't been as productive as Brunson yet in my career, but are you willing to bet that your boy Ant could be better over the next 4 years than Brunson? Maybe bump that up to, 4 for 90, 4 for 85. I think that's totally reasonable. I think in some ways Brunson sets the market for Anfernee Simons. Not like that Ant's people are going to be like, hey, Anfernee Simons is better than Jalen Brunson, because like better is maybe eyes of the beholder. I think Brunson's better. It's just a little more, just production wise. Anfernee Simons had a crazy final 32 games of the regular season where he looked fantastic, but it's 32 games. It's not several years, and it's not the playoff high leverage ace production that we've seen. Ant hasn't been very good in the playoffs, period. Didn't get much opportunity, and then when he had some chances, didn't seize them. Then when he got good, he got great. That's the thing with Ant. When it clicked for him, it clicked really loudly. And I think Anfernee Simons has a chance to outperform his contract. Like if he signs 4 for 80 and comparable players are making $27 million, like Ant will be better than his contract, which bummer for your boy Anfernee. It's better to be overpaid than underrated, but it's good business for the Blazers that Ant has a potential to get there, and I think Brunson helps us sort of gauge that. But he's not the only one who agreed to a contract this week on Tuesday. You're listening to Wednesday, June 29th show, but I'm talking on Tuesday, another contract that was signed that kind of will help set the market for Jusuf Nurkic. Let's talk about Ivica Zubac and what it means for the Bosnian Beast here in Portland. But before we do that, I want to tell you about Sakara. Sakara is the company that is anchored in food as medicine on a mission to nourish your body through the power of plants. Sakara gives you the tools you need to transform your life with their organic, ready-to-eat meal delivery program and their functional wellness essentials. They got nutritionally designed, chef-crafted breakfasts, lunches, and dinners that are made with powerful plant-rich ingredients that will help boost your energy, support your digestion, curb your sugar cravings, and get your skin glowing. Plus, all of that is delivered directly to your door. And right now, Sakara is offering my listeners 20% off your first order when you go to sakara.com/lockedon20 or enter the code lockedon20 at checkout. That's Sakara, SAKARA.com/lockedon20 to get 20% off your first order. Sakara.com/lockedon20. Jalen Brunson's getting paid. Anfernee Simons is going to get paid later this week. Thursday, Anfernee Simons is going to agree to a big old contract. It's not going to be $110 million, but I think Brunson is setting a bar that Anfernee Simons can at least point to and say, hey, look at that. There's another bar that's coming up here as I smack my microphone here. If you're listening on the podcast, apologies. And if you're watching on YouTube, that's just me talking with my hands. But if there's another bar that was set this week when Ivica Zubac, Clippers center, agreed to a contract extension. He had a player option for about $7 million. The Clippers declined that player option, then immediately signed him to a 3-year extension. 3 years, $33 million for Zubac. I like Zoo. I think he's good. He averaged 10.3 points, 8.5 boards, and 1.6 assists last year. He just wasn't a big minute guy. And in some ways to no fault of his own. The Clippers just don't want to play a whole bunch of minutes with a traditional center. They like to go small and funky and weird. They had Isaiah Hartenstein, who played some backup minutes. Eventually, they had Robert Covington, who played some of those backup minutes. They played some weird, Marcus Morris at the 5 stuff. Like they're a funky team that does funky stuff. They love that lineup versatility. Zoo's per 36 in advanced numbers suggest that he's like maybe a little better than his box score numbers, but his box score numbers are what they are, and they're 10 and 8. That's making him $11 million. I think in some ways, the way that the Brunson sets maybe a ceiling for Anfernee Simons, a ceiling he's not going to get to, but a ceiling for Anfernee Simons' payday, I think Zoo sets the floor for Jusuf Nurkic's payday. One, Jusuf Nurkic's already making more money than this, and he's earned himself a raise. He's paid himself, maybe not a big old raise, but a raise nonetheless. Let's get this out of the way. If I had to guess, I bet Nurk signs 4 for 60. I'm choosing round numbers. 4 for 80 for Nurk, or 4 for 80 for Ant, 4 for 60 for Nurk. That's a guess. But centers are just less valued in the league at this exact moment. I think if we had been entering a similar summer following the Suns-Bucks playoff series, big guys are really valuable. Look how good DeAndre Ayton was for the Suns during their championship run or their, finals run. And look how good Brook Lopez was. Wow, it's so important to have big centers. Look how good Bobby Portis was. All this and then it changes, and now it's look, everyone must be 6'8". And it's a wings league, and everyone knows it. It's true. It was a wings league even when the Bucks won the championship. They just happened to have the craziest wing that's maybe ever played the sport in Giannis Antetokounmpo. But I do think in general right now at this exact juncture in the world, there is less value in the NBA on centers. And so I think Zubac got this good money for him. The average annual value of $11 million, some job security, and $30 million. Tight. Good job if you can get it. That's the floor for Nurk. Nurk's last contract was 4 for 48, flat $12 million a year. He's earned a little bit of a raise. Like I said, 4 for 60 is what I would guess he's at, right at that $15 million. That would be my guess. Nurk's counting stats are better than Zoo's, right? Nurk's averaged last season 15, 11, and 2.8 assists. He's a much better passer, much better passer. He's probably has a little more juice in the post, although when the Blazers were whole, you don't see a lot of Jusuf Nurkic post-up action. We'll see if that happens next season, but we did not see it when they were whole. We only saw it when they were extremely depleted. And Nurk's, but they're pretty comparable defensively for my money. I don't think. I get in trouble whenever I compare players. Everyone gets mad at me, but Nurk is better than Ivica Zubac. I'm very confident in that. I just don't think he's way better. I think they're in a similar tier. They're a similar tier of decent, but not the elite centers. Nurk's also just gigantic, and being gigantic, really valuable. It helps that he is just so freaking big. But Zoo is good, and $11 million annually is a good deal. I think Nurk makes 15. And I wonder in this market where there are so few good bigs out there who will actually hit free agency. And Zubac had a player option. He never even hit free agency. He agreed to this before things started. And I believe he's inked on the dotted line. I think the he's signed because of the rules allow an extension to go ahead and be signed as opposed to him hitting free agency. He's signing extension with incumbent team. Nurk can get more money by going into free agency than signing an extension, so he's going to hit free agency and he's going to come back to the Blazers. Like, simple as that. The sort of other things that they were going, the other ways that the Blazers were going to go about things, they didn't choose those paths. So Nurk's coming back. That's how this is going to work. And obviously Nurk's probably known he was coming back unless something very strange happened for for a long time, since basically the All-Star break. But I think the Zubac contract is the floor. The DeAndre Ayton's going to sign a max contract or darn near close to it, and that'll be kind of what sets that. But there's other guys out there, the sort of Mo Bambas, Montrezl Harrells, Bobby Portises of the world, that will also help kind of set Nurk's like whatever competitive market. But I think Jusuf Nurkic has a chance to be the highest paid center in free agency, not named DeAndre Ayton. I think there's a really good chance that in this market, for how centers are valued and all these things, that I think Jusuf Nurkic making like $15-16 million a year is like he might make the most money, average annual value than of any other center on the market. And I think you look at Zubac, that's a pretty good player. He's only getting 11. So like the floor, for non-defensive centers, like someone like Montrezl Harrell, it's like, well, not gonna pay him a whole bunch of money. Bobby Portis, like it'll be curious to see what he makes. I think Portis is pretty good. I'm a believer, but be curious to see what he makes. I don't think Bobby Portis can make $18 million a year. I think he's more in that like 12 to 15 range as well. So it'll be really curious. And I think Nurk has a chance to be the highest paid center. One like little quirk, it might make sense for the Blazers to front load Nurk's contract and pay him the most money in the first couple years with descending. There's steps in contracts, like it's 8% raises. So it could be 8% is what the Blazers can offer him. So they could make it, bump it up as high as possible and then have it decline. I think that could make more sense for both parties because you get the best of Nurk and pay him the most when he's at his peak, and then the contract gets cheaper over time. We'll see if the Blazers do that. Like, I haven't heard any whispers of that or anything like that, but I just, when I'm considering the future of Jusuf Nurkic and giving him a long-term deal, that to me could potentially make sense for both parties for a variety of reasons. What I want to talk about to close the show in the third segment is the more I kind of like squint and look at the NBA horizon, I don't think the Blazers are going to be involved in a straight across trade. If the Blazers are going to get involved in the madness that might ensue over the next 10 days, I think they're going to be a facilitator type team. I want to talk about why I think they might be a facilitator type team in the third segment to close this show. But first, let me tell you about BetOnline. They got more props, more odds, more lines than ever before, and you can bet on any action you want. You can already place NBA futures bets. You can bet on who wins the NBA title right now. Well, let me tell you, you're not going to get particularly short odds on the Blazers. If you're looking for a long odds team, the Blazers are, in the bottom of the pack, towards the bottom of the pack. You can. They're not the true bottom, but they're below the Mendoza line. If you don't want to bet on the NBA futures, you can bet on everything else that's happening in the sports world. That's the MLS, that's the NWSL, that's boxing, that's MMA, that's tennis, that's golf, whatever it is, you're going to find it on BetOnline. So don't wait. Take advantage of this offer today. That's BetOnline, where the game starts. Still a pass first point guard. I'm still Mike Richmond, and you are still listening to Locked On Blazers. We talked about Jalen Brunson getting paid and what it means for Anfernee Simons. We talked about Zubac getting paid and what it means for the Bosnian beast, Jusuf Nurkic. On the eve of free agency beginning, and it's already begun because the league doesn't even follow its own rules because the NBA is a mess. I mean that as a compliment because I find it entertaining, but also like an insult. The NBA is a mess. Get it together. Have anyone follow the rules you have in place. There's a week-long tampering period, and teams are already agreeing to contracts 48 hours beforehand. Come on. Just chill. good on the reporters for getting it out there. If you know, you know. It's props to Chris Haynes and Mark Stein for for breaking this news. But when I squint and I look at the mess that's going to happen, there aren't big fish in free agency. There aren't big fish in free agency. It's not that type of year. Like I said, Jusuf Nurkic might be the best center on the market, like the best unrestricted free agent center on the market. I think you could make a very compelling case for that. I think it would be harder to make a case that he's not, but sure, you can. I believe in you. But when I squint and see, not a lot of teams with cap space and not a lot of free agents worth creating cap space for, I think the moves that are coming from teams that are trying to make moves are going to come via trades. You look at the Dallas Mavericks; they don't really have cap space. They straight up don't have cap space. They don't have money to replace Jalen Brunson. So if they're going to look to to replace his production in the backcourt, they're either praying for Spencer Dinwiddie to be a little more consistent than he's been ever in his career, or they're going to be in the trade market and try to trade, whatever they have in the back half of the rotation, and they're pretty thin, quite frankly. But they're going to be active in the trade market. Some other reported deals, John Wall has the Houston Rockets have announced this. It's official. They've bought out John Wall. He's given back some money on his $47 million contract, and they're buying him out, and he's going to enter free agency, and it's been reported that he's going to sign with the Clippers. So it's also been reported that by Andrew Greif of the Los Angeles Times that Greif's been on it. Shout out to Coos County legend. That the Clippers are likely to re-sign Nicholas Batum, a free agent that a lot of Blazers fans are pining after because he's fun nostalgia and a good basketball player, and when those two things meet, could not possibly be better. But the Clippers now, their roster's getting a little crowded. They'll have 13 with Batum, 14 with, they signed with a rookie draft pick, Diabate, but it's, if he's a two-way player, 13, and they still need another backup center and 14. So they might be a team that moves parts. They have a ton of money locked up in the middle of that rotation with Reggie Jackson, who I don't think they'll trade because they desperately need point guards, or Marcus Morris, who in April Andrew Greif reported that was widely expected to be traded. So you're looking at teams make these additions. What's Dallas going to do now to upgrade this roster? What are the Clippers going to do now? They're out adding John Wall. They've kind of addressed their do they need another point guard thing? They still need a center. So where does that leave the Blazers? It leaves the Blazers looking at teams like the Lakers, who had Russell Westbrook opt in, and the Nets, who had Kyrie Irving opt in. All of these teams are, the sort of big free agent sign and trade frenzy, bonanza, whatever you want to call it. It hasn't materialized. So it's going to be teams kind of moving around the margins and moving some money around. And the Blazers, because they don't have really sexy stuff to trade, their sexiest trade piece is Nasir Little, who I think's good. I'm a Tar Heel legend, right? But I don't know that Nas has a great deal of trade value on the open market, right? He just doesn't have a ton of production to point to in the league. Justice Winslow is not a particularly compelling trade piece. Josh Hart is a pretty compelling trade piece for the Blazers. Josh Hart is certainly above Nas on the list, but the Blazers probably want to keep Josh Hart because they just need depth. So it's the parts they have to trade is Eric Bledsoe's contract. He's how they get involved with trades in the future. They've got some trade exceptions where they could trade Bledsoe and then, for a big money contract, or help facilitate in a larger trade, and then a traded player exception, like a $3.5 million and a $6.5 million trade exceptions, where they could absorb some contracts back in. But they've got some future second round picks that they could kind of move around, although they gave a handful of those, or a couple of those, away to the Pistons in the Jeremy Grant deal. Portland's best path to getting better is via trade, but they don't really have the type of assets that it's trade this guy and you get this type of thing back. They're not a straight across trade guy. And when you look around the league at other teams who are also going to wheel and deal, it's Portland's best bet to getting better is becoming a facilitator in multi-team trades. Like, I think that's their path here. They're going to use the mid-level exception in free agency and try to sign someone, but their path to really upgrade this roster, if they're committed to going for it, they need another starting caliber forward and another backup center, a high level backup center. Like they just absolutely need those two things. That is like non-negotiable if they're going to be like a seriously competitive team. It's hard to thread that needle, but for sure is obviously their needs in heading into the summer. And because of their lack of trade access, and because there's just not going to be teams aren't going to be clearing cap space to chase big free agents because it's not that type of summer. It's going to be, the trade market is how teams are going to get better. And the Blazers are not, because they don't have the assets to be involved in a like sort of direct trade. Trade facilitators, facilitating trade stuff with the assets that they have is their best path to do it. So when I'm looking at this news and I'm looking at Brunson and I'm looking at Zubac and I'm looking at John Wall and just like sort of thinking about the dominoes falling with these teams, like Portland is going to be a facilitator. Like I'm just reading the tea leaves. Shout out to my divination class, is what I'm best at. That's how they're going to improve. So when you're kind of thinking and sending me ideas for like, can the Blazers do this and this and this? Like, the rumors that they're going to be after Matisse Thybulle, or rumors that they could be in on Kenyon Martin Jr., who I think straight up is good. They should try to get Kenyon Martin Jr. if they can get him, because he's good. And Matisse Thybulle is also good, but maybe a little overrated because he's just such a zero on offense. Like those trades would be because teams are making moves. They're making money moves because Philly wants to sign PJ Tucker to a giant contract. So they need to clear some playing time and clear some money. Like that's how Portland gets involved, is like, and the back half as a facilitator. That's where they're going to strike to be creative and to improve this roster, is facilitating other teams' moves. So instead of like looking for the Blazers to make the big move, look for them to be involved in a big move, because getting involved in a big move is the Blazers' best path to upgrading the roster. That's it for today's show. Come back tomorrow. We got more. It is free agency week. We are going to have a ton of fun. Tomorrow's show will be the eve of free agency. We'll look ahead at all of the things the Blazers might do and the latest news, and we'll have a whole bunch of fun. Then we got free agency. Then the Summer League starts a week after that. Like, it's here. The NBA offseason is upon us. I'm excited. I hope you are too. Come back and listen tomorrow. Make it your first listen every single day. Appreciate you listening, and I'll talk to you soon.